Hello everyone, and welcome back once again to Manga Goblin. I'm Trix, of course, and this is a brand new series called TTRPG Tuesday. The very first game that we're going to look at is quite an old one from the year 1999 called Mordheim. Now, Mordheim wasn't exactly an RPG, but it had some RPG elements. Those elements were your warband could do various things, like it could gain additional skills, or you could gain new members, or it could lose members in battle and things like that. It was rather RPG light, but as it was the first game someone suggested, I thought I would go through a bit of the background and a bit of the rules, kind of, and a bit of the history behind Mordheim and where it is in current day. So, the game Mordheim was set in the city of Mordheim, set in the Imperial year 1999. It was also released in that year, as I've said, set 500 years before canon time at that period. Basically, the setting was this. A huge meteorite crashed into the city of Mordheim, basically ruining it. The asteroid was made of wordstone, or warpstone, and the various factions fought in the ruins of the city of Mordheim, looking for bits and pieces of the wordstone so they could trade for influence and power. This was also the start of a rather unique figure who has got a new model out this weekend, and that's Balekor, the Dark Master. Of course, he was only known as the Dark Master at this period of time. No one really knew who he was, and he headed the Chaos Cult, or the Chaos Forces, in the city of Mordheim. In the main game, you have basically human mercenaries, which came from different parts of the Empire. Now, at this period of time, there was a civil war, so the different warbands represented the different, like, burgomeisters or counts of the various regions, and this led into a bit of roleplay elements because obviously Marienburg at this time wanted independence. There was a few other people that wanted the throne for themselves. Now, this is 500 years before Karl Franz, and I believe it was called the Time of the Three Emperors. Now, at this time, Bloodbrand Casting was making his power play for the throne of the Empire, and that's where you have the vampire faction in the game. Then you have a Skaven faction represented by Clan Eshin, which are kind of ninja rats, and it plays into a lot of the tropes that you'd find in sort of a ninja game. So they've got blow darts, they've got poison knives, they've got things like that. There are the Sisters of Sigmar, which are a very interesting faction, and they're a group of female warrior nuns, a bit like the Sisters of Battle. This was a couple of years later than the old Sisters of Battle army that came out in, I think it was 95, 96, and this was in 99, so it's 3 years later. A lot of people back then did convert the old Sisters of Battle to be Sisters of Sigmar, and I remember that quite accurately, because they would take the old hammers from the Knights of the White Wolf and they would stick them on the metal models to make Sisters of Sigmar. They had like a big cathedral that was untouched by the meteorite crashing into Mordheim, and they were hunting for the wordstone, obviously, to protect the city and to reclaim it. Then there was one other faction called Witch Hunters, which are your atypical witch hunters that you can find in generic fantasies at sometimes. These had dogs, these had zealots, these had various witch hunters, and the sad thing about this game was that it's practically impossible to find anything of the miniatures these days except the Clan Eshin Night Runner box, which are the same box. And one of the note is the glorious Empire Militia box that sadly doesn't exist anymore, and it was a massive inspiration for zombie pirates. It was a massive inspiration for lots of versions, and it's been lost. So that was just a quick overview of the various warbands that are available in the core game. A couple of other warbands, say in Blood on the Reek, you would have Beastmen, or you would have the Carnival of Chaos, which are massively popular, and you still see people doing Carnival of Chaos themed armies, especially for Nurgle. I think they missed a trick by not having the other gods do carnivals, especially Slanesh, but alas, you can't have everything. Going from that, as I said, we had the other campaigns, but I just wanted to make a note of the core book and some of the warbands in the book. The hired swords were quite interesting. You had like a freelance knight who had like a very interesting fish shield motif, and you had a ogre, which is more like the old ogres than the ones that came later, because we had the ogre kingdoms later and they redesigned the ogres significantly. Then we had the halfling scout, who was also a cook for your warbands. We had a higher wizard, we had a witch, we had a couple of characters for the various factions. We had one of the Sisters of Sigmar higher ups, I think her name's Bertha Bearstrong or something like that. And then we had the Sword of Twilight, we had Johann the Knife. So yeah, I just wanted to add a little bit more detail into Mordheim and a little bit more of the history of the game. I want to note that the designers of Mordheim were Alsacio Caldor, Thomas Pernin, and Rick Priestley. Gab Thorpe did some of the background, and I think it was at a time when Games Workshop was maybe at its peak. It's trying to come back to that, and I do see that in some things, but there are also some significant mistakes which I'll talk about in my video on Monday. The other fractions that we had in Mordheim, and we still have because it still has a large supporting fan base out there with Coreheim or Broheim, depending on your preference of the living rulebook or the fan-made rulebook, respectively. I'll put the rules to those. I'll put the links of those sites in the description, so you can have a look at the two different types and see if you like them. Mordheim was a very interesting game because it started off with a very few figures. You have maybe between 8 and 10, and you could expand up to 20. You would have basically a few heroes, 2 or 3 heroes, and then you would have some troops. So you would have some bowmen or some swordsmen, and then you would have like a specialist young blood hero, a specialist old blood hero, and your captain for your team. These of course could get various skills and injuries over the period of time of the campaign, which was the sort of RPG, TTRPG element of Mordheim itself. Saying this, Mordheim had some support from Games Workshop for a little while in a magazine called Town Crier. They expanded the rules into Lustria, gave us new warbands such as the Amazon, such as the Shadow Elves, such as the Dark Elves and the Bretonnians, and then they even did a setting in Araby, in the Desert of the Tomb Kings, where you were plundering the desert, and it had an interesting mechanic with the old dehydration thing. Basically you had to carry your own water while you were plundering the desert of the Tomb Kings and stealing all their stuff. Similar with the Lustrian campaign, except it was more... There was a little more mechanics involved with the old dehydration thing, whereas the Lustrian one was basically the jungle trying to kill you. The desert one was an actual real challenge for some players, because you had to buy water supplies and stuff. Now, we didn't get a lot of support after Town Crier support ended. We got a few bits and pieces here and there. They kept publishing the book up until I think 2009, and they kept the living rulebook up until 2016, I believe. Then it was taken down with the rest of the Fnatic games, and a year later the Mordheim PC game was released, but that has very little to do with the actual game except the setting. So if you look on Mordheim or Mordheim, you'll see a few additional rules. There's a Cathay setting with the Silk Road. There's a few other bits and pieces. Some of the old writers from the Fanatic magazine, I believe, are involved in the Silk Road campaign, so they're pretty comprehensive. So there we go, that's the very first game for TTRPG Tuesday. I went through a little bit of the lore, a little bit how it stands in the community now, and what kind of expansions there were produced in the Town Cry magazines. This was actually one of my favourite games back in 1999, in the early 2000s. It was a very interesting game, and it was there's a little bit of lore. The the additional goods that you can get, such as the key in Cursed City. Well, the Mordheim actually had a coin from that period. Yeah, it was the very first time that they'd done something like that, I believe, or it was one of the very few times they'd done that before. I think there was an Imperial credit done at some point in time, but I can't remember when that was. But yeah, there we go. I thought that was a little bit of a nugget of information that people might enjoy. I'll put some pictures up of the various wall patterns and stuff on the video. So I want to thank everyone for listening, and take care of yourselves, and bye bye.